Okay, I'm going to go ahead and begin. I respect your time, and I really, first of all, want to thank you for joining, taking your lunch hour or the hour after, to join us. Really, just to better your knowledge of Canvas and to better serve your students. So I really appreciate that. So this is the first of 4 sessions for new quizzes training for faculty at TW. And just so that you're aware, this is the basics session on which the others build. And it really honestly gets more exciting and more interesting as we proceed through the later sessions. I will show you the agenda, but first I would like to introduce myself and my co-host. I am Robert Lipscomb, and I'm an instructional designer at TW Center for Faculty Success. I primarily serve College of Nursing and Healthcare Administration program faculty and staff and adjuncts, instructors. And then my co-host is Denise Arellano, who also is an instructional designer here at the Center for Faculty Success. And she actually serves many other programs, including one of the most exciting that all of the IDs wanted, the Aeronautical Sciences, the new pilot training program at TW. And I'd like to thank Denise for joining and assisting me with these trainings. She is very experienced with new quizzes as well. And Denise will be monitoring the chat throughout our meeting to look at and answer questions that you may have. You may also use the Zoom hand raise icon at any point during the session to ask a question or ask for clarification. I'm happy to pause and do that for you. So what are we doing today? First, our learning objectives for instructors are to be able to recognize the benefits of using the new quizzes engine, to be able to create a new quizzes assessment and preview it. And that's really important. And I'll go through that when we start the screen share. And then to individualize your new quizzes assessment for your students in a variety of ways. And then last, I want to make sure that you all are able to use the Canvas resources that I put into the agenda by topic. So I'm going to go ahead and share in the chat, if you open it, a link to the agenda for this session that includes many links within the agenda to all kinds of new quizzes, resources, general ones, and then resources for you as instructors based on the topics for today, and resources to share with your students. Here is the link. I'm sending it to you right now in the chat. And I'm welcome to send that to you again if you just reach out to me at any point in time. So first of all, I am going to go over new quizzes and the differences between classic and, well, primarily what are the benefits of new quizzes as opposed to classic. And then I'm going to start a screen share and show you how to enable new quizzes, how to create a new quiz, emphasizing a few important points, how to adjust your quiz settings so that you feel confident administering a new quizzes assessment. And then this is one of the best features, which I'll show you in the next slide, for new quizzes is its abilities to moderate and accommodate at a very granular, individual, customized level for your students. And then most important, before you publish or administer any quiz, especially this new quizzes with alternate question types, is previewing before and proofreading it before you administer it with your students. And then we should have some time for a Q&A. So why new quizzes? Well, for students, new quizzes, I guess the key word for everything would be versatility. All the options it affords that are more nuanced, more granular than in classic quizzes. For students, one, there are many more alternate question types and the ability to use a stimulus to which you may add questions to be able to individualize feedback so that you can enter feedback for the entire quiz. You can enter feedback for the entire question, regardless of what answer. You may individualize feedback for each individual answer option, depending on which question type you get or you use. And you can do all kinds of really cool things in the feedback that I'll show you. And then I already told you about the accommodation and moderation choices. For instructors and for Canvas administrators, Canvas, the new quizzes engine, they are compatible with Blueprint courses if you happen to use them. You can also migrate any quizzes you've already created or exams in classic quizzes. With the push of one button, you can make it into you can copy it into a new quiz. And then this is one thing that my nursing faculty have been most excited about, is the ability to create item banks, which are similar to question banks in classic quizzes. They're called item banks in new quizzes, but the ability to then take those question banks, we call them item banks in new quizzes, and to share them to courses or to other instructors, to your colleagues, okay? Oh, and then last, if you happen to use outcomes or you're interested in it, you are also able to align each individual question in new quizzes to an outcome and create outcome reports through the new quizzes reporting mechanisms. Some of these things we will not really focus on today, but I'm highlighting why new quizzes is appealing to use as opposed to classic quizzes. And we will show you these things throughout the sessions of this training. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and transition to showing you how to enable new quizzes in your course so that you are able to start experimenting with it, familiarizing yourself with it, and then eventually using it to assess your students. So first, while I do this, I highly encourage you to follow along if you want to just log into Canvas and enter one of your courses, okay? Pick any course. You might want to pick your sandbox. You're going to scroll to the bottom of your course navigation menu, and you're going to click on the bottom link, the settings. You should see tabs at the top of your settings page that allows you to look at the sections or to arrange or customize your navigation menu. But we are going to click on feature options. And there is an option, if you scroll down or skim over your options, called new quizzes. If you expand it, you will notice that it says when this flag is enabled, the new quizzes tool will be available, okay? So yours, if you have not used new quizzes before, on the right side, the state should be disabled and it should be a red X. You are going to click on the red X and click enable so that now you see a green check mark, okay? I do want to be clear that there are a couple other options that affect new quizzes. The one I do not encourage you to check or to turn on, so you can enable the disable classic quiz creation feature option. I do not think you should do that if you want to choose between new quizzes and classic quizzes, if you're not ready to make a hard and fast and permanent switch to new quizzes. So I like the choice. So now the only other thing I want to mention to you is we're not really talking about item banks today, but if you do already use new quizzes or you have item banks and your colleagues have talked to you about it and you want to see their availability, you will not be able to see item banks or access it until you enable the new quizzes feature. Only then will you, if you go into the navigation tab of your course, You will then see, you might have to refresh the page, but probably in your disabled column, you will see item banks right here, okay? If it is disabled, all you have to do is move it up to where it is in mine, up in the enabled column, or you can click the three dots and click Enable. And that will put it into your course navigation menu so that you can access it. Okay, now you do have to click Save for navigation menu. I'm sure you are aware. So we're going to now go to our quizzes page. And you are going to click the dark blue plus or add quiz button. And now that you've enabled new quizzes, you will see a choice between new and classic. Okay? You are going to click new quizzes and click submit. Now create an assignment name. Put whatever points you wish. You can change some of these things later if you want, but you do have to have an assignment name. How you would like the grade to display. Now, please notice this is an external tool submission type because it's not technically in Canvas. Classic quizzes is in Canvas. New quizzes is a separate application, software application that has been automatically integrated by Instructure, the Canvas company, so that you can use it through Canvas, and you can't change this. You can put due date and availability another time, but you will, just like for graded assignments, be able to choose when the quiz is available to students and when it is not. I told you about the external tool situation because other than the typical assignment details page options here, you can't do anything in new quizzes unless you launch the other application, the new quizzes engine, by clicking build. Click build, and now you will get all of the options, settings, reports, moderation features, etc., that come with new quizzes. It's going to obviously default you to the build function, which we're going to look at first to actually learn how to just build a new quiz. So you put the title of your assessment if you haven't already. You can always put your instructions telling students how to prepare for it or how to take it or how much time they have, anything you want to put in there. I just want to mention one key feature of new quizzes. So I'm not going to go into detail building all the questions and the answer options, but I want you to know that for almost every text box in new quizzes, it will give you the rich content editor. That's the fancy term for all the bells and whistles that come with the text box, the rich content editor. So you can choose any formatting options, heading levels for accessibility purposes, or if you have sections that you need students to read, highlighting, super and subscript, and embedding links, embedding images, embedding videos or audio files, embedding documents or uploading them from your computer, making icons using a Lucidchart, embedding a Panopto video you've already recorded or recording it right there in the RCE here, or using plugins to link to a Google Doc, any of the indenting and bulleting. You get everything. You can embed YouTube videos, okay, by copying the embed code and pasting it here. So I just want you to know that it gives you all the bells and whistles for every single, I can't think of one that isn't a rich content editor in new quizzes. So this is just the instructions field for the quiz. Click done when you're finished. And then there's a little blue plus button. This is where you add components of your quiz, typically questions. Click the plus button, and you will see that you have 12 question types. We are not going to go through the details of those quite yet in this training, but you will see some familiar ones: multiple choice, multiple answer, matching, true and false essay, and even the fill in the blank. There are many options within those, and you can do some really cool stuff that I will show you throughout this training in later sessions. One thing I want to point out that's one of the advantages of new quizzes, however, is that notice that above this line are all the questions, and it doesn't say questions, okay? You can insert content from an item bank up here, or you can insert all these questions, but this is a separate section because this is a stimulus. It's not a question. It's a text or media resource to which you can add questions. So you can have students read a short story, for example, and answer the questions about it, etc., or a scholarly article. So pick whichever you would like. I would do multiple choice first to show you some really neat features in multiple choice. So to be clear, every question that you insert into your quiz will have what's called a question title. That is not where you type the question itself, and it can be a little confusing. This is merely an organizational label, and you can have some kind of naming convention for organizing your question types or your question content or the learning objectives that your questions all relate to. So, for example, if I were a reading teacher or English language arts or rhetoric, I might put inference. So these questions are all going to be about inference. And then in the question stem, this is where you get to put your actual question. And notice that you get all of the cool features that the rich content editor provides. And that also includes, for a later session, I'll show you, you can build a table that is screen reader accessible right here in your question, putting table content, okay? Or mathematical equations, all kinds of stuff. So you type your question here, okay? And then you can put your answer option and start putting them underneath. It'll automatically give you 4 for multiple choice, and the first one is usually highlighted as the correct one, but you can change that, selecting which one is correct, enter your answer item, and this is one of the neatest features about new quizzes, okay? The way that you're able to put individualized feedback. So for this answer item, if a student picks this answer, you can click this button right here, the dialog box icon, and it will give you another rich content editor in which you can write custom feedback. Now, this is neat that you can also insert links, because it's the rich content editor, to the exact page in your course that this question or the answer shows a misunderstanding of concepts, and you can send the students immediately to the correct page that addresses it. You clearly do not understand categories of nonfiction. So there you go. And now that student who got that wrong because they didn't understand it can go immediately in their quiz results after their quiz directly to the student resource they need to study and get better. Okay, so you can do that with any of the answer options. And then one other really neat thing about this is for any question, you get an on-screen calculator, and you can pick basic or scientific. Please be aware that in the settings up here, I'll show you in a moment, you can allow students to have a calculator for the entire quiz. But notice that these are all choices for just this one multiple choice question. and you can give them a calculator for just this one question. And on other questions, make it so that they cannot have a calculator. Canvas is kind of smart though, and they know that if you're allowing them a calculator here, if they can see all the other questions on which they're not allowed to have a calculator, but the calculator presents or displays, then it might be a better idea to enable one question at a time, which is something you can do in the settings tab that I'll show you in a moment. But it's trying to make sure that if you only want a calculator for this one question, but not for the others, that you should probably click that and you can allow them to have their calculator. This is one of my favorite features for specifically the multiple choice and new quizzes. To vary points by answer. Normally, you put whatever the point totals for the question are. What point total is it? Okay. But if you click vary points by answer, you now have the ability to change the point values at a very nuanced level for each answer option. Why? Well, for nursing, the faculty whom I serve typically, they often have, situations where in a case study or scenario, there are many correct things to do to assess a patient, right? So they're not wrong per se. But when someone's life is on the line, there is clearly a priority or a triage order that makes one thing of paramount importance, whereas something else is not as important. So you can say, okay, this is the correct answer. It would have to be marked as such. And so I'm going to give you full credit. But actually, this one, it's an okay answer, but it's not the best. It's not really the correct one, but you're not wrong. So you can actually give partial credit. Or even, 75%. So you can go in and do that and adjust like a range of scores on the multiple choice. And then you can shuffle the choices as well on just this question. Not the whole quiz, but just this question. You can align it to outcomes if you happen to have outcomes or learning objectives in your course or in your program, department, or college, if you happen to have institutional outcomes. And then you can also add it to an item bank based on how you have your item banks organized. And then you're going to go ahead and click done. It's not going to let me because I didn't really do anything. So I'm going to actually delete this and I'm going to add another question, multiple answer. And you're welcome to do that in your quiz right now. The only difference really between multiple choice and multiple answer is you still have the question title, question stem, answer options with all the rich content editor choices, but you're going to automatically be able to check multiple answers as correct, and you can add additional answer options. You can do that in multiple choice too. So, oh wait, actually, that's not the correct one. This is the correct one. So you could say these 3 are correct out of the 6. Notice the difference. You no longer have the individual answer option rationale in multiple answer, and you are not able to vary the points at a granular level per answer option, but you do get this really cool feature to choose to give students partial credit. So if you have, like, say, this question's worth 1 point and there are 3 correct answers, each of the correct answers is going to be worth 0.33 points. For every one you get correct, you get added 0.33. For every one you miss, you lose 0.33. And then if you don't select anything, it doesn't penalize you. So, but you can also choose an exact match. So I'm sorry, you don't get it at all unless you get all these 3 correct. And then you get the same choices that you did in multiple choice in the other question types. So you can click done. I don't have anything in there. It won't let me save it. So I'm going to go ahead and delete one more time and move on to matching.
Robert,
Yes.
just you said with the partial credit, if they do not select anything at all, then
It's basically you divide the total question to points by the number of answer options that are supposed to be correct.
right.
And then they give you credit for the ones you do get.
Okay.
And actually, if you only get 2 out of the 3, then you would get 0.66 points. But if you pick one that is incorrect, then it penalizes you and it will take the 0.33 away.
Okay.
The way you said is correct. So if you've got, for example, if you have 3 correct answers out of the 6, they will get 0.33 for each of those choices that they do select. But let's say that there's 3 correct answers and they only choose 2 of the correct answers, they'll get 0.66, and that's it. However, if they choose 2 correct ones and then they make an incorrect choice or 2 incorrect choices, they lose 0.33 for each incorrect. So if they choose 2 right ones and 2 wrong ones, they get nothing. So
0, yeah.
Yeah, it's.
So this is the advantage of having a fact checker on my own training. I appreciate that.
Got it. Thank you, guys.
That's a great question, Dr. Harris. Okay, so let's look at matching real quick. And I'm not going through all the question types. Some of them get much more complicated, and I'm saving that for a different session. So again, you can put the question title. It might still be about inference or rhetorical concepts or whatever topic you want to label it as. So the only thing to know here is that it doesn't have to be a question per se, but whatever vocabulary word, for example, or term that you need, you put that here, and then you can put the description or the definition or whatever it is on the right side to match with it. Okay, so these have to be matched as correct. And when the student sees it, it will automatically mix them so that the student has to pick the correct answer. Now, in that vein, one of the coolest things about new quizzes is, or this question type, so you can add additional question answer pairs, but the distractor, okay, you can add distractors. Why would you do that? Well, any student can use process of elimination to guess and say, okay, well, there are only 4, so this one has to be the right answer since it's the only one left. Well, if you add a bunch of distractors, then clearly the student has to be able to tell which one is actually the correct answer or not. And so I would recommend using distractors. The shuffling the order of the definitions or terms, you can do that too. Again, you still get calculator. The way it looks for a student is actually, okay, here it is. So see, and the distractors would be in there. So even though there may be 4 matching items, there could be 7 or 8 drop-down answer options. But I'm going to go ahead and show you where that feedback is.
Okay, but when we put those in for the matching, we put them in the question and answer correctly, the matching ones, and then
that's correct.
They'll take care of the system will take care of everything else.
Exactly. The system will mix them.
Okay.
So that the student has to pick from the drop-down menu whichever one is correct.
Okay.
So great question about question feedback. So in multiple choice, I showed you the rationale or the feedback you could put for each answer item right next to the answer item. Well, this multiple dialog box is where you pull up right next to the total points for this question. You can pull up a rich content editor for a correct answer, an incorrect answer, doesn't matter which one, as long as you got any incorrect answer, you're going to see this feedback that the instructor puts in here, right? And then you can provide general feedback regardless of answer. And I know in nursing, for ExamSoft, you often had a rationale for the entire question that you wanted all students to see regardless. This is where you would put that in here. Thank you for asking that question, Dr. Harris. Does anyone else have any questions? Did I neglect anything? Yeah, Dr. Weaver?
Well, this isn't related to the question type, so maybe this isn't the right time. Can you convert? I've been having issues like bringing quizzes from other courses into my current courses. Could that be related to the new quizzes versus the classic quizzes?
It could be.
Okay, we can get to that later, but anyways, okay, thank you.
Yeah, but the answer is if you have classic quizzes or new quizzes in a course from which you're copying, you can bring both of those in.
And will you cover that in one of these 4 trainings?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. Okay. Anyway, and then you click done, and then the matching question presents as I just showed you right here. Okay. So again, this question I'm going to have to delete because I don't have anything in there. Okay. And then true and false is actually very simple. Question title, question field. You're just going to put whatever statement or instructions, and then whether it's true or false. And then the only option you get here is a calculator. I'm pretty sure you get a calculator for any question type. And then align outcomes, item banking, total points, and that's it. Click done. Okay. Essay question is kind of neat. So now you could have students type something on their own, have it prepared, and submit it and upload a file. That is right here, file upload, so that it could still be included in the quiz as a component of the grade scheme, just as you would this essay question. But you could do it in a file upload way where you might have more control, or you allow students to prepare something ahead of time or whatever. Okay, but if you enter an actual essay, like that you want the students to see the prompt for the first time in this quiz, you go ahead and you enter your prompt right here in the question field. This is the question title, remember. But then you can allow them to use the rich content editor. They could, if you allowed them to, they could enter a table, they could enter mathematical equations, they could enter a video, they could upload a YouTube video, they could do whatever the rich content editor allows them to do, or you could choose not to let them use the rich content editor. Of course, they always get calculator. You can allow them to have the spell check feature if you think that's important for them. You can show them their word count, and you can set a word limit by saying, okay, you have to write at least 100 words, but no more than 300 words. And then you can put custom grading notes, which apparently is one of the few places without the rich content editor. And then you can align the outcomes, item banking, total point value. And then again, you can put the custom question feedback for correct, incorrect, or overall answer, no matter what answer. And then you click done. So those are the question types that I wanted to show you today. Those are your very commonly used questions in any type of quiz. We'll get into some of the really more exciting and unique alternate question types in later sessions. So now, that's how you can build a basic new quiz. I do want to show you something that I failed to show you before. And I just want you to see something. So in your quizzes page, you will see all of your quizzes. Well, the icon used in Canvas is a little rocket ship for a quiz. But please notice that suddenly there's a dark rocket ship here. This shows you instantly and easily that this is a new quiz. These are classic and these are new. Can everyone see that? I just wanted to show you that. And now let's go ahead and look at the settings for a quiz. What kind of settings can you choose? So we were in the build function before, where you're able to put instructions. You can put any course questions and content. We are now going to click the settings button. And you can shuffle the questions for the entire quiz. Please note that these are all for the entire quiz. Default for the entire quiz. You can shuffle the answer options for the entire quiz. Remember, you could do it just for that one question, but here you can do it for the whole quiz. You can decide that, hey, you know what? I need students to see only one question at a time on their screen instead of like a printout where they can see all the questions laid out in front of them. This allows them to only see one question at a time. And when I previewed this, remember I was showing you this quiz? Well, notice that was one question at a time because you don't get to scroll down and see any of the other ones. You have to submit to proceed to the next question. So, and you can allow students to backtrack, to go back and change an answer or not, or you can say, you know what? No. After you submit a question, you're done and you can only move forward. Access code, if you want to present on the screen for only students who are in class so that the ones at home don't maybe know what that is. You can put a time limit at the end of which Canvas will automatically submit the quiz and the student will be scored even if they're not finished. Filter IP addresses, ask me a question if that interests you, but usually I don't recommend that. That would involve getting IT or service desk to help you set that up. You can allow a calculator for the entire quiz if you want. Not for each individual question per se, but this is for the whole quiz. You can allow students to clear the multiple choice. Now here's where you can show custom feedback with the quiz results, and this is for the whole quiz. So not for a question, but for the whole quiz. I would think this would be useful if you have a little formative assessment in class, and then you want to direct students to do something else on their own quietly after they're finished that quiz. You can put all the instructions, links, a video, whatever in here to direct them to the next activity. And then you can allow multiple attempts and you have various scoring choices, right? So no matter how badly they do on any attempt, I want them to just get the highest score that they earned. Or I want it to average their scores so that, they can't just take it 20 times over and over again and then figure out what the right answer is and get credit. The latest answer or the first attempt. Like, sure, you can redo it and learn from it, but you're only getting credit for the first attempt. And then it usually defaults to unlimited attempts if you choose this option. But you can say, okay, you know what? I do want them to be able to do it again, but only once. And that's it. So they only get 2 tries on this. You can require a time limit in between attempts. So you can't take this quiz for another 2 days because I want you to go back and study beforehand. And then you can click Enable Build on Last Attempt. This has had some problems in the past, and I have not seen any evidence on Canvas's feature and updates and fixes that it has been fixed. I will say this. if you want to attempt using it, I would try using it on a not too important practice quiz, and you need to check this box before you publish it or administer it and not change it again afterwards. And I really don't recommend you use it probably. Although it is a cool feature. It basically is allowing students to redo the same assessment, but they only have to redo the questions they get wrong. So they don't have to retake the whole thing all over again. And then one of the most important things to mention in this training is restricting student results view. If you don't pay attention to anything else in this training and you care about like test or quiz security, this is something I think you should probably try to remember. And that is, if this is not turned on, so right now it's not turned on. When a student finishes a new quizzes quiz, whether Respondus Lockdown Browser is used or not, when they click on the quiz to see their results, they will see everything. They will see the questions, the answer options, which one was right, which one was wrong, which one they picked, how many points they got, the answer feedback, the rationales. They'll see everything. There are some changes that are supposed to be happening soon, but right now we recommend that you restrict student results view and you leave all of these checkboxes unchecked. That way they can't see anything except for the grade that they earned if it has been posted to the grade book yet. Does anyone have any questions about the settings?
I have another question, and it
Go ahead.
but are the new quizzes optimized for like their phone? That's like been a benefit of me like structuring something as a quiz because they can do it on their phone. But do we know if the new quizzes is optimized to be used, or
That is
impossible?
I think it's possible. Optimized, that I honestly, that's a great question. I don't know. Denise, do you know anything about that?
I don't. They can take a new quiz on their phone, but I don't know that it's really been tested that way. I mean, it's still going to be size responsive usually, but other than that, I don't think they've done really anything special to be used on a phone.
And then one last thing I'd like to cover, and this is one of the best features of new quizzes that is distinctly different from classic. Your moderating tab. This is where you get to enter your DSS student accommodations and make moderation adjustments to customize the quiz for your students, depending on emergent or contingent needs, okay? So I want to make something very clear here because it's really cool, but it's pretty easy to remember too. So in the Moderate tab, you'll see how many quiz attempts the students get and how many they've taken or submitted. You'll see their scores. You'll see the time that elapsed for their quiz. You'll see their log, which we can talk about another time. But the most important thing is in this column, the accommodations column, if you enter the student's time accommodation designated by DSS in like the first dinky little new quizzes quiz at the beginning of the term, it will apply the same accommodation for all of the quizzes that follow for the whole term. That is a huge time saver. You don't have to go through and enter accommodations for every new quiz that you create throughout the term. How do you do that? So let's say Kylie, I know, has a DSS extended time accommodation. Well, this quiz is 60 minutes long, right? So you could say, oh, I'm going to go ahead and give her 30 minutes additional time because she gets 1.5 time. Well, the best way to do this is, in my opinion, to put the time limit multiplier and enter 1.5 times. Why? Well, for this quiz, it's 60 minutes long. So it's going to automatically give Kylie 30 minutes extra. But next week, I have a little formative assessment quiz in class that's only 10 minutes long. It's going to automatically give her 15 minutes because 5 extra on top of 10, instead of having to manually add the number of minutes for every quiz. Does that make sense, everyone? So it's very helpful. So I strongly encourage you to use the time limit multiplier and make sure you enter these at the beginning of the term or as soon as you find out that the student has a DSS extended time accommodation. And then new quizzes will remember that designation for the rest of the term. So then what you may ask is the point of the moderate feature. Moderate is where you can handle individual emergencies. A student gets sick in the middle of the one quiz attempt and has to leave the testing hall. And so you need to allow only that student to reopen the test after the time limit so they can finish it, or you want to give them an additional attempt after they submitted early because they had to go vomit in the bathroom. And then again, you can give time accommodations for whatever reason. Okay. Does that make sense, everybody? And that really is it for session 1. That covers everything on our agenda. Does anyone have any questions? Okay.
All right. Before we stop, there's one thing I want to mention.
Yes.
One of my favorite things about new quizzes is something that happens at the very, very beginning. You get to specify how many points that quiz is worth.
Oh, yes.
Ahead of time. And it calculates their score based on the number of points that you have stated at the beginning. That way you don't have to worry about how many points each question is worth or how many questions you have. So, you don't have to say, well, I've got, 100 points and I'm going to give them, I'm going to have like 50 questions. So I have to go in and manually put in 2 points per. You just put your questions in, tell it how many points are there, and it calculates for them.
Yes.
So that's one of my favorite things. So just had to stick my nose in there.
That thank you so much for adding that. And Denise is talking about right here in the new quizzes quiz on the assignment details page, not in the build function, but in the typical assignment page of the new quizzes quiz. Whatever point value you put in here,
it will take how many questions they got right, and it will take that percentage and convert it to match the number of points that you've given. So you don't have to worry about how many questions you have or how many points each one is worth. You can vary the points if you want, but it will calculate that for you and grade them based on the points that you have stated ahead of time.
That's a really good point. Thank you so much.
Would you just, if you wanted all the questions weighted equally, you could just leave it at 1 and not type anything there, and then in the points on like the start page, you could put that it's out of 100. Correct? Even if you just have 10 questions or something. Okay.
Yeah, that's right.
I have an instructor who will have one exam worth 157 points and another one worth 73 points, and they're equally weighted in her mind, but the points don't match. So this is perfect for her because she can state every exam is 100 points and she can put as many questions or as few questions as she wants.
That's a huge advantage. Thank you so much.
That way it calculates correctly in the grade book. So
that's actually under the details of the quiz of whatever particular quiz. Yeah. Okay.
Yes. So yeah, you just go to your new quizzes quiz and click in the quizzes index, click edit, and it should take you to the assignment details page. There's some other ways of getting into the quiz that'll put you in build automatically, but you need the assignment details page, yes. I'm so glad you mentioned it. Are there any additional questions? Because it's now 2:00 and I understand if you need to go. I am going to say one last thing before you get off the meeting. Just to emphasize it one more time. Please note that with all of the cool options and features and settings at the question level, at the quiz level, I can't urge you enough to try the preview function, which is just this button right here. When you think you're finished proofing your quiz and making your changes, always click the preview button because it will also apply all of the settings with the shuffling, the requiring an access code, and the allow backtracking and the one question at a time. It will make it very much like the actual student experience. And every time I've done this, I found that I made some mistake, or I thought I was doing something beneficial, and then really I realized that that doesn't work from the student point of view. So please always preview your assessment before you publish and administer it with students. And I'm going to take it one step further and say, because we actually recommend this and it's in some of our materials on the CFS website, if you're going to experiment with new alternate question types, and we haven't really gone into too many of those yet, please practice it with your students before there are grades that are attached to it that will affect the students. So practice it in class with them, get feedback from them, see how it goes from your perspective. And then when you feel more comfortable or you know how it works, then you can start using new quizzes in more experimental ways with your students. Yes, Dr. Burns.
Thank you, Robert, for this training. It's helpful. I actually have all the sessions you sent out on my calendar.
Excellent. Thank you.
I wanted to ask one question regarding, and this may be in a future session, so forgive me if it is, but the lockdown browser with responders, will you be covering that on like how to use it, or did I miss it? Because I had some people coming in and out of my office, so I might have missed it.
No,
Will you
so
talk about that?
I do not believe that that is planned because technically Lockdown Browser is a third party, a separate tool. But what is your question about Lockdown Browser? Because
how do you use it basically? Is it just something you attach to a quiz if you wanted it through Lockdown Browser? Because I know we have a separate like component on the menu for that.
Yes, I would be happy to meet with you and take you through all of that.
If you haven't ever used Lockdown Browser before, you can turn it on just as you would for classic quizzes, and it works just fine. It's just as you were saying, there's some small differences between the way it behaves with new quizzes versus classic. But if you want to use Lockdown Browser, yes, you can absolutely turn it on. It works perfectly fine. And if you have questions about what it does, what it can and can't do, just talk to your instructional designer. Any of us can help you with that.
Yes.
Okay. Thank you.
So with this feature in new quiz, do you have to use Lockdown Browser?
No. Does anyone else have any questions?
No, but thank you guys. This is great.
You're welcome. The main thing that is personally, I think, a benefit of new quizzes, you will see more of in the later sessions that build on this basics. And that is some of the alternate question types allow you to do some very kind of authentic task-based, case study-based, really, meaningful assessments with your students at higher level thinking. I'm just going to ask you to please join some of the later sessions, because then you will get to see some of the neater possibilities that new quizzes can afford. I would like to also thank you again for joining this training session. I'd like to thank Denise in particular for helping me in various ways, for planning and monitoring the chat. And I hope you all have a wonderful day. Please remember, you can always reach out to your instructional designer for customized individual meetings and help. And I'm going to go ahead and conclude the meeting. Take care. Thank you so much.